Welcome to Excel Magic Trick number 1346. Hey, if you want to download this Excel workbook, Excel Magic Trick 1346 finished, or the start file so you can follow along, click on the link below the video. Wow, we have an amazing video here. We want to see how to split a master table into subtables with each product on a new sheet. Now, here's our master table, date, product, region, and so on. And here's the product column. What I really want to do is automatically from this table, as I add new records, I want to break this apart so that on the Aspen sheet, I have all the Aspen records. Carlota, I have all the Carlota records. Not only that, but if I come down here and double click and change this to the word quad, instantly I want all the records to be not for Aspen, but for quad. Back to Aspen. Now, back to this master table sheet. I'm actually going to do two videos. In the first one, 1346, we're going to see how to do it with an array formula. And then in 1347, we'll see how to do this with Power Query. All right, so we're going to start with the array formula version. Now I'm going to go to the start file. Here's the start file right here. And here's our master table. Now I've already converted this to an Excel table and named it under Design Properties. The name of the table is F Sales. Now we're going to need to reference multiple columns in our formula. And I want to give you a preview of how the table formula nomenclature works when we're referencing columns. I'm going to highlight the top cell in the product column. Control-Shift down arrow to jump down to the bottom. Control-Backspace to jump back to the active cell. Our table formula nomenclature will always have table name and field name in square brackets. But watch this. If I enter this and forget the error, if I copy it down, I want you to notice that it's locked on the product column. But if I were to copy this to the side, product changes to region. So we're going to have to be aware of that behavior when we build our formulas over on the next sheet. All right, let's go over to Aspen. Our first task is to extract in this cell right here the product name from the Sheet tab. Now we can start to build the formula by using the cell function. Cell function is a great function that lets us extract all sorts of different information. We want simply the file name. Now, cell does some funny things sometimes, so you need to lock it down on this sheet by putting A1. Now, I've done other videos about what happens if you don't do this, but for us, that's what we need to do. When I Control-Enter, there's the entire file name. Now, notice at the very end is the sheet name, and it will always follow a closed square bracket. So I'm going to use the replace function to replace everything from the first character all the way to that closed square bracket and replace it with nothing. Then I'll be left with just the Aspen. So F2, I'm going to use replace. There's the old text. And actually, I need to copy this because I'm going to have to use it twice in this formula. Control-C. Now, remember, we're replacing, so comma, the start number, 1. I want to start at character 1, comma. And I need to go how many characters? All the way to that closed square bracket. So I search for the position of the find text. Please find closed square bracket, comma. Within what text? Control-V. So now search when I close parentheses. It's sitting in number of characters. So if I click on it and hit F9 to evaluate it, replace will go from 1 to 84 characters in that file name. Control-Z. And comma, the new text it's going to put in its place is double quote, double quote. Now, technically, that's a 0-length text string, but for us, it'll just put nothing. Close parentheses and enter. You've got to be kidding me. Look at that. It got the name. If I double-click and call this quad to check it and enter, sure enough, it's working fine. I'm going to type Aspen and enter. Now, our next goal before we create our formulas for looking up Aspen records and return them, we actually need to count from our master table how many records are for the product Aspen. If we look back over here, we simply need to look through the product column and count all the Aspens. We can use the COUNTIFs function. Now, the criteria range, we need the entire product column. Now, instead of going back to the sheet and highlighting the entire product column, table formula nomenclature is awesome. I simply type FS, and look at that. The screen tip even gives me an icon that says, hey, this is a table, tab. Then I type a square bracket, and look at that. Not only do I have the option for all the field names or column headers, I also have a bunch of other very useful table elements. Now, we want product, so I can double click or down arrow and tab. Close square bracket. Now, notice it does not show up in blue when we're on a different sheet than the actual table. Now, I type a comma, and my criteria is up arrow, B1 Aspen. When I hit enter, 36 records over there for Aspen. Now, when we think about formulas to extract records like this, notice the lookup value is Aspen, and there's 36 duplicates. Normal lookup functions cannot handle duplicates. That's why we have to switch over to an array formula. Now, I want to look at the index function. That's the lookup function we're going to use. An array, that's going to be all the items we potentially want to go look up. But it's the row number or relative position of the item you want to extract. Now, remember, escape, if we go look here, the row number argument, as we copy the index down, would first need a 4, then a 7, then a 9 as their relative positions, not the 14, 12, and 9. So what we're going to have to do in our formula is for each column, date, product, region. For this record, it's going to have to know, please always go and get the 4th item in the date column, 4th item in product, region, and so on. If we did it manually, it would look like this. This whole row for index, for the row number, would need a 4. This whole row would need a 7. And this whole row would need a 9. No problem. We can do this with an array formula. Now, the trick is we're going to have to create that entire array of matching relative positions for Aspen. And then as the formula copies down, we're going to need to extract the first smallest, which will be 4, second smallest, which will be 7, 9, and so on. Now, we would like to use the small function. The small function allows us to extract the first smallest, second smallest, third smallest as we copy the formula down. But I don't want to use small. I want to use a function that came in Excel 2010, aggregate. Now, aggregate's awesome because it will allow us to use the small function if in the first argument function number we put a 15. Now, the reason that we would use aggregate 15 instead of small is because when we get to comma, comma, the array argument, it handles array operations without any special keystroke. All right, so we picked function 15 for small. Options, we definitely want ignore errors because our resultant array will contain errors, and we need to say, hey, ignore those errors, comma, and this is the magic argument. We're going to create our entire array of relative positions. Now, we're going to start off by using the row function. And we're going to look through the date column. So I type FS tab, square bracket, tab for date, close square bracket, close parentheses. Now, row function simply looks at that entire column there and gives you the actual row number. So if I hit F9 to evaluate that, 6, 7, 8, 9. Remember, 9 is not what we want. We need a 4 right there. So Control Z. Now remember, the first record is 6. So if I subtract row, again, but on a single item, F sales, square bracket, and I'm going to tell it to look at the headers. Now remember, the header is an element in that table that always sits exactly one row above 6, which will give us a 5. Close square bracket, close parentheses. If we highlight just row, F9, we can see that gives us a 5. Now remember, this had 6, 7, 8. Well, 6 minus 5 is 1. 7 minus 5 is 2, and so on. Control Z. Now I need to close off the orange parentheses. That whole array right there, if we F9 to evaluate it, there is every relative position, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 187. Notice we need to eliminate or filter out all of the 1, 2, 3, and just keep the 4, then just the 7, then just the 9, and so on. Control Z. Well, I can do that by dividing that whole numerator by the product column. F sales tab, open square bracket, P tab, close square bracket. Now, I definitely need to ask the question of the product column, are any of you equal to Aspen? Now, watch this. That's a normal cell reference, so I can lock it with the F4 key. But that range needs to be locked on product as we copy over and down. As we saw at the beginning of the video, it would be only locked as we copy down. If I copy this to the side, it'll move to the next column region. So I need some way to lock this. If I hit the F4 key, it just doesn't work for table formula nomenclature. So it's kind of clunky, but you have to put an open square bracket, and then very carefully, colon, open square bracket, product, and I'm going to hit tab, and then close square bracket, close square bracket. That crazy little thing right there means table formula nomenclature locked no matter where I copy it on the product column. All right, so you ready? Close parentheses. Now this little bit will just give me, if I F9, trues and falses. And notice there's a true in the 4th position, in the 7th position. Because this is in the denominator, falses will be 0s and trues will be 1 when we run that division operator. Control Z. Now watch this. This is totally magic. If I click the entire array, meaning numerator, division, denominator, and F9, there's my filtered list, 4, 7, 9. The 6 will tell the formula to avoid the divide by 0 error. And the 15, meaning small, will extract the first one, then the second one, then the third one as we copy the formula down. Control Z. The last argument, and you could see it right here, for small, comma, is K. Remember, I need the first smallest for the first row, second smallest, third smallest, and so on. Well, I'm going to have to create a formula element right here that as I copy down gives me the numbers 1, 2, 3, and so on. We use not row, but rows. Now I have to know which cell I'm sitting in. I'm sitting in A5. So I'm going to type $5, colon, A5, close parentheses. Now, what's so cool about rows is it'll count how many rows there are in a range. 5 to 5 is 1. But because there's no $sign right there, it'll move to 6, and then 7, and then 8 as I copy it down. So it'll give me the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 as I copy down. Now let's close aggregate off. And the reason that we used aggregate instead of small is because that's a big array formula. If we'd used small, we'd have to use some special keystroke, but I can just enter it. I used Control Enter, and watch this when I copy it over and down. That is the magic of this array formula for extracting records that have multiple matching rows. Now I can simply come to the top cell F2. That's delivering the relative position for index, so I put index. Remember, I need to extract date, product, region, and so on. So in the array, F sales tab, square bracket, date is the first column, close square bracket, comma. Now remember how table formula nomenclature works. That date will move to product and then region as we copy it to the side across the columns. But as I copy down, it will be locked. Now I'm very carefully going to come all the way to the end, close parentheses, Control, close parentheses, and I get an error. And actually, this happened to me earlier. When I hit Tab on the date, it got rid of aggregate. So watch this. I'm going to have to type aggregate again. I could come to row number and make sure I got it all there. Yes, indeed. Control Enter. That's a date. I'll worry about that in just a second. Let's copy it to the side. And two things. I do not need this last revenue column. I mistakenly copied it over too far, so I just deleted. And then right here, before I copy it down, Control 1, and I'm going to select date, click OK. Now I can highlight this row and copy it down. I'm dragging, dragging, dragging down to some point past which there will be no more records. So I actually have to know my data set. Now we get num errors down here, which we'll fix in just a moment. But I want you to notice something, that these are 36 records, right, all the way to the top. And past 36, I don't want this error to show up. What I do not want to do with array formulas that extract records is I do not want to use the if error. And the reason why is because that means the array formula will be running in every single cell, including past row 36. Now, array formulas sometimes take a long time to calculate, especially if you have a lot of them in your workbook. And we are going to have a lot of them. So don't use if error. We're going to use the if function and pick an alternative logical test. A logical test different than testing to see whether the formula errors out. And no problem. I'm for the logical test going to test, hey, when the rows function, which is our number incrementer as I copy down 1, 2, 3, 4, when you are greater than 36, and then I'm going to lock it with the F4 key, whenever that's the case, then please, instead of running the array formula, value if true, I'm going to put double quote, double quote. Now, that's a 0-length text string that'll just be dumped in the cell. Otherwise, the value as false will be our big array formula. And that array formula will only run for us in the first 36 rows. Now, I'm very carefully going to come to the end, close parentheses, Control-Enter. Now, when I copy this to the side, it's going to copy that number formatting. So I'm immediately going to point to the Smart tag and say fill without formatting. Then I'm going to double click and send it down. And sure enough, when I scroll down, look at that. Now remember, if error, we would have had to run the array formula down here, but it never gets to that array formula. It's just dumping that in after it runs the logical test. Control down arrow. That is amazing. Control home. We have to test this. Let's come down here, double click Aspen, and type quad and enter. Look at that. That is amazing. I'm going to change it back to Aspen and enter. Now, I want to calculate revenue. And in the next video, as we mentioned for Power Query, we'll actually get to do all the data extraction revenue formula calculation all in the Power Query window. But here, we've extracted the actual records, and now we make our formula. I need to take units times price times 1 minus the discount. And I'm going to use the round function. In the number argument, I'm going to say, hey, give me units times price. And I don't want to say times discount, because that would just give me the amount of the discount. So I say, hey, in parentheses, 1, which is the entire amount, minus whatever the discount is. Close parentheses. Now, comma. These are pennies, so I'm rounding to the penny. So I put a 2. Close parentheses. Control-Enter. And I'm going to use the keyboard Control-Shift-4 to apply currency. And then double-click and send it down. Control-down arrow. Oops, I'm getting a value error. And that comes from the fact that I'm trying to multiply those 0-length text strings. And multiplication is math, and they don't like text. Now, there's a few ways we can fix this, but I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I know there's 0-length text strings there. So Control-up arrow. Top cell, F2, I'm going to say if function. If one cell to my left, if you're equal to double quote, double quote. If that's the case, the value of true, I'm going to put double quote, double quote. Otherwise, please run the round calculation. Close parentheses, Control-Enter. Double click and send it down. And boom, there it's worked. Now, let's copy the sheet over. And instead of right-click, copy, and then clicking a bunch of things, watch this. If I click on the sheet with my mouse and drag it up, notice there's a piece of paper right there and a black triangle pointing down. But if instead of simply holding the mouse, I also hold the Control key, watch what happens. Now there's a little plus right there on the piece of paper, and that plus means I am copying. Now, it's very important I have both Control and my mouse held down at the same time. I let go of the mouse first, and instantly it copies the sheet. Now, I double-click, and call this quad enter. Hold Control, click, drag. I see the plus. I let go of my mouse. Double click. And I'm going to type Carlota. Control, click, drag, let go of the click, double click. I'm going to call this Sunshine and enter. Hold Control, click, drag, let go of the click, double click, and I'll call this Yanaki. Hopefully I spelled it right. That is amazing. Now let's test all of this. And we could go down to the bottom of the table and see it's all working. But let's go back over here and off to the side. I've added some new records. And I'm going to copy this because the idea is that this is supposed to be dynamic. I'm going to copy these and I'm going to add them to the bottom of the table. Control down arrow. The way the Excel table works is if you paste something here and down, it'll immediately become incorporated. Control V, and look at that. When we go to our Aspen sheet, we better have more than 36. And sure enough, we do 39. If I go down to the bottom, that is amazing. The quad similarly has 43, and so on. All right, that's a couple of pretty wild formulas. We saw replace and cell and search to get the actual sheet name, countifs, and this awesome array formula, not with if error, but with if. Now, these are formulas. So the one advantage to formulas over our next video when we see Power Query, as you saw, everything automatically updated immediately. I didn't have to refresh anything. The disadvantage to formulas like this is array formulas, especially when you get a lot of them in a workbook, looking at huge ranges, really slow down calculation time. All right, so Control Home on the master sheet. We saw array formula. Stay tuned for 1347. We'll see an awesome solution using Power Query. All right, we'll see you next video.